Hello and welcome. In this week's video, we're going to be talking about Dave Ramsey's baby steps and see if they are right for you. Before we get started on this channel, we talk about all things business and personal finance. So if you're interested in that kind of content, consider subscribing for more. Dave Ramsey is a personal finance titan, and if you're watching this video, it's highly unlikely that you haven't heard of him. Dave Ramsey is probably one of the biggest names in personal finance today, and he's known for his hardline stance on no debt and the rice and beans approach to getting out of debt as quickly as possible. According to his website, he's written over 15 books, and over 5 million people have participated in his flagship program, Financial Peace University. That's a ton of people that he's helped with the 7 baby steps. So clearly this system works for people, but personal finance is not a one-size-fits-all. So is this right for you? Before we get started, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just a guy whose hobby is personal finance. So take this with a grain of salt. Do your own research. None of this is to say anything bad about Dave Ramsey. I'm merely trying to take a different perspective on this and kind of offer my opinion. I can just give you some other things to think about before you jump into the baby steps. Baby step number 1 is to save your $1,000 starter emergency fund. This is a great first step. If you're working on tightening up your finances, starting an emergency fund is a great place to start. An emergency can completely derail your financial goals and really set you back. So having something set aside for a rainy day is a must. However, I don't think $1,000 is enough. Just think about it. $1,000 is nothing. An emergency health expense, that could be way more than a couple $1,000s. Your car repair, that could easily be a couple $1,000s. Even worse, you lose your job. How long is it going to take you to find a new job? It's probably going to cost you more than $1,000 to live. If this were to happen, $1,000 would be nice, but it's not really going to get you very far. Now, baby step number 3 says that you should save 3 to 6 months in an emergency fund. But what happens if that emergency happens way before you get to baby step 3, right? Spoiler alert here, baby step 2 is to pay off all of your high interest debt or all of your debt that's not your house. That's going to take a long time. It may take you a couple years to get through baby step number 2, and to only have $1,000, you could have any number of emergencies happen within that period of time that you're completing baby step 2, let alone while you're building your emergency fund in baby step 3. I mean, look at the situation that's happening right now. If you're watching this in the future, it may still be going on, it might not, I don't know. But with this illness happening in 2020, so many people are losing their jobs. And in any economic crisis, we couldn't have planned for this. And if you're in the middle of baby step 2, paying off all your debt, and you've only got $1,000 saved, and you have a medical emergency or you lost your job, $1,000 just isn't going to cut it. It's just not enough. So what's the solution here? It's not a one-size-fits-all answer. It's really going to depend on your particular situation, like so many things in personal finance. But even though this is an emergency and you can't plan for that just by nature of it, think about your situation and think about what emergency is most likely to happen. If you have a chronic condition, maybe consider that. If you have a job that has more of a high turnover rate, more likely to get laid off in an economic recession, maybe consider that. But I really think that you should, before you start going 100% into paying off your debt, you should have probably 2 to 3 months of expenses saved, at least a month of expenses, because it just $1,000 just is not going to cover you. The whole point of baby step number 2 is to put every single spare dime that you've got, right? That means that you're not going to have any savings other than that $1,000. So I really think, at least a month. For me, I'd rather have 3 months before I start doing that. Emergencies can happen anytime. That's the nature of them. And, they could happen before you get to baby step number 3 and have a good emergency fund saved up. So I would make that emergency fund more robust before you move to baby step number 2. That's just my advice. That's what I did. That's what I would do. So just something to consider. Baby step number 2. This is pay off all debt except your house using the debt snowball. In this step, you're taking 100% of your disposable income and throwing it into paying off all of your debt. And you're using the concept that Dave calls debt snowball. And what the debt snowball is, basically line up your debts, smallest to largest, and you pay off the smallest debt first, and then the second smallest debt. And you continue to do that. And the point of that is it's really kind of gives you just a psychological advantage, because if you've got $100,000 of debt, but your smallest debt is $1,000, it might take you a long time to pay off that $100,000, but you could probably pay off that $1,000 in a couple months. So it gives you kind of that psychological boost, paying it off, being done with it. And it definitely works. Mathematically, it may not be the best way to do it, because if your smallest debt is 4%, and your second smallest debt is 20%, mathematically that's not beneficial for you. But if your second smallest debt's $20,000 and your smallest debt's $1,000, it's gonna be pretty discouraging trying to pay off that $20,000, and you're just not gonna feel that dopamine hit of paying it off. So this is really great advice. The debt snowball is a great way to approach paying off your debt, and I would highly recommend that. The problem, though, that I have with baby step number 2 is this can take you a long time. And while it's absolutely worth it to pay off your high interest debt, you're missing out on the beauty of compound interest. And if it takes you 2 or 3 years to pay off your debt, you're missing out on, a pretty good amount of growth. And if your debt is 4% and you could earn 8% in the market, mathematically, you're losing money. Now, of course, psychologically, there is an advantage to paying off your debt, as I mentioned before, but you're essentially losing money by paying off that debt sooner than if you put it, say, in the market earning 7 or 8%. Now, if you're paying off high-interest credit card debt and it's 16, 17%, you're going to end up making more money by paying that off first. But let's say you've got student loans that are 3%, maybe 4%, you're probably better off paying, maybe accelerating it a little bit, but you're probably better off actually investing that money in the market if you can make like 7 or 8% just in like an S&P 500 index fund. This is just something to consider. If you want to pay off all your debt, that's great. Knock that out. Psychologically, that can be a huge benefit to you, and you will save money by not having to pay interest on that debt. And especially if you have a ton of debt, it can feel really good to just put all your effort into it and get rid of it. But just think about, if you have low interest debt, you may be better off putting that elsewhere, maybe putting a little more than just the minimum toward that low interest debt, but you may actually be better off putting what you would have put toward that low interest debt into some sort of investment. So that's just something to consider. Now, of course, obviously, if you want to get rid of it, just get rid of it. All right, now we're talking about baby step number 3. 3 to 6 months worth of expenses in an emergency fund. 3 to 6 months worth of expenses in an emergency fund is pretty typical advice. Now, whether or not you choose 3 or 6 months is really going to depend on your personal situation. You need to think about your responsibilities. Do you have kids? How likely are you to lose your job? What are your likely emergencies? Do you have an old car that's going to be likely to break down? Maybe you'll need a new one soon. Maybe you'll need some emergency repairs. Just consider your situation. And in fact, if maybe you do consulting or you have a client base that could kind of fluctuate, if you do run your own business, maybe consider even having more than 6 months of expenses. Now, this might be overkill for a lot of people, but if your income can tend to fluctuate quite a bit, then you may want to even consider more than 6 months. But for most people, that would be overkill. Overall, baby step 3 is, it's excellent advice. My only gripe with it is that I really think you should have saved more in an emergency fund before you move on from baby step 1 to baby step 2. Okay, moving on to baby step number 4. This is invest 15% of your household income into retirement. Again, this is great advice. Investing in retirement is one of the best things you can do for your financial future. 15% is pretty typical advice. If you are younger, 15% is great. If you're getting closer to retirement, the more you can put, the better, depending on how much you've already saved up. If you're kind of just getting into this journey now and you're closer to retirement, if you can put down 20% or more, that would definitely help you out quite a bit. My concern here is with the baby steps, you are taking a 100% all-in approach. And that's one of the things why this is so effective, because it lays out a very simple plan for people to follow for their finances. You do this, you do this, you do this, then you do this. And that's great. But I do wonder about, again, going back to what I mentioned in baby step number 2, at this point, you have gone through baby step 1, 2, which could take a long time, 3, which also could take a while depending on your income and your expenses, and you're waiting till baby step number 4 to start investing at all. That's a lot of time in the market that you're missing out on, and that could be okay depending on your age. But my concern is this, is as you get closer to retirement, 40, 30, 20 years, compound interest is so important that if you are closer to retirement and you're missing out on 4 years of compound interest, that might not be worth it. If this works for you, great. But if you can contribute to retirement throughout this process, even if it's a very little bit, if you can invest a couple percent of your income even while you're paying off your debt, right? Maybe you're not throwing 100% of your disposable income, but 98%, and take 2% of that and put it into retirement. At least you'll be getting something, some sort of compound interest. I just think that it may be beneficial to try to prioritize, right? So you put most of your effort, most of your money into debt and a little bit into retirement. That way, when you get to baby step number 4 and you prioritize that, you still got some retirement, and you've kind of utilized the beauty of compound interest instead of being at ground zero when you get to baby step number 4. Now, again, this is just my advice, take it or leave it, but I do think it is worth considering the potential future impacts of not investing while you are doing the other 3 baby steps. Okay, let's talk about baby step number 5. And this is save for your children's college fund. Now, student loan debt is sky high, and frankly, colleges will probably get more and more expensive over the years. So if you could give your child a gift of free education, or at least reduced cost education, this would be really incredible. And student loan debt is putting people so far behind the 8 ball when they finish college and get out into the workforce that it's really hurting them. So if your kids will be so much further ahead than so many people if you can help them out, or at least reduce the cost of college for them. Obviously, if you don't have kids, you could probably skip over this step until you do. This is really good, and I'm glad it's further down in the list, because you can't pay for your kids' education if you can't retire. So funding your retirement and your financial goals is definitely more important, because if you can't be there for yourself, you can't be there for your kids. We are almost there. Keep bearing with me. We are at baby step number 6. We've got one more to go after this. So baby step number 6 is pay off your home early. If you can and want to pay off your mortgage early, that's great. Good for you. This is a great place in the list to put it, I think. But looking at it mathematically, mortgage rates tend to be pretty low, usually between about 3 to 5%. Typically, you could probably do better putting your money in some sort of investment like an index fund. In most cases, it really wouldn't make sense for you to pay off your house early, but there are certainly advantages to paying off your house early. I mean, depending on where you live, you could be $8,000 to $2,000 a month extra in your pocket. So, I mean, this is certainly not a bad thing to do. But if you want to look at it just from a number standpoint, mathematically, you're probably better off investing more money into the market than paying off your house early. All right, well, we have made it to baby step number 7. And if you have made it this far on this journey with me, I thank you. Baby step number 7 is to build wealth and give. There's nothing I can say about this. This is an excellent final step. Once you reach this point, this pretty much takes you to the rest of your life. Obviously, the more wealth you have, the more you can give, so that benefits everybody. The 7 baby steps provide a simple and comprehensive way to get your finances in order. And looking at the numbers, there is no question that people seem to love it and find it effective. Now, Dave Ramsey's whole shtick is absolutely no debt. And while this is very good advice, just like anything, it can be taken too far. So while high interest rate debt is always bad, and you should always pay that off as soon as possible. Pay off your credit card bill at the end of the month, every month, if you can. But conversely, debt utilized properly can actually help you build your wealth faster than you would be able to otherwise. For example, real estate investing. You can utilize mortgages to build your wealth exponentially faster than you would be able to otherwise. This is something that you just couldn't do without any debt. I mean, it would take you so long to save up money to buy a house in cash to rent out. Whereas saving a down payment on a house and then taking out a mortgage to rent out a house, that takes so much less time. Now, I'm not saying you should necessarily go do that. There's a lot more that goes into it, and I'm certainly not an expert on real estate investing. All I'm saying is that used properly and done right, taking out debt can help you increase your wealth quickly. I don't know where this quote originates from, but I heard a saying that you should follow Dave Ramsey's advice until you get out of debt and then stop following it altogether. I think that sums up how I feel about the 7 baby steps and Dave Ramsey altogether. His advice is phenomenal for trying to get you out of debt, but once you're there, maybe look toward other sources to kind of get you to where you want to be. All right, that's all for this video. I hope you found it helpful, and I hope the different perspectives on the baby steps kind of gives you an idea of the baby steps as well as what else is out there, and let you know whether or not the baby steps are right for you. So if you did find this video helpful and you liked it, please hit like. And if you want more content like this, please consider subscribing, and I will see you next time. Thanks. Bye. Dave.